Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Secretary of State make a statement on the government's analysis of the long-term economic impact of Brexit upon the economy?
Minister Steve Baker.
Mr. Speaker, I begin by setting out our approach to publishing economic analysis, I hope once and for all. I can confirm that when we bring forward, I think the honourable gentleman will want to listen to this, I can confirm that when we bring forward the vote on the final deal that we agree with the European Union, we will ensure that this House is presented with the appropriate analysis the government has done so that the House can make an informed decision. But I think all members of this House must surely agree that the government cannot be expected to put such analysis into the public domain before that analysis has been completed. That would misrepresent our views, Mr. Speaker. Furthermore, the government cannot be expected to publish that analysis while the negotiations continue, which would surely harm the national interest. Parliament has rightfully agreed that ministers have a duty not to publish anything that could risk exposing our negotiating position. Now let me turn to the article which has prompted this question. The article is a selective interpretation of a preliminary analysis. It is an attempt to undermine our exit from the European Union. As I've told the House before, the government is undertaking a wide range of analysis on our exit from the EU. The next stage of this analysis, summarised in a draft paper brought together for ministers this month, has been a cross-Whitehall effort to support our negotiating priorities. It has not been led by my department. It is not yet anywhere near being approved by ministers. Even the ministerial team in my department has only just been consulted on this paper in recent days, and we've made it clear that it requires significant further work. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I only saw this report myself this morning. The analysis to which I believe this article refers is a preliminary attempt to improve on the flawed analysis around the EU referendum. It is there to test ideas and to design a viable framework for the analysis of our exit from the EU. At this early stage, it only considers off-the-shelf trade arrangements that currently exist. We have been clear that these are not what we are seeking in the negotiations. It does not yet consider our desired outcome, the most ambitious relationship possible with the European Union, as set out by the Prime Minister in her Florence speech. Such an agreement, Mr. Speaker, is in the interests of both the UK and the EU. Therefore, the scenarios in this analysis continue to suffer from the flaws we've seen in previous analysis of this type. These sorts of analysis have proved to be wrong in the wake of the referendum, not least because there is huge uncertainty around any forecast, especially in the long run and especially in the context of a major strategic choice. It is the government's job to improve on this analysis, but to do so we first have to understand where previously it went wrong. That is what the analysis to which this article refers is. It's not a forecast for our preferred outcome of the negotiations. It does not yet properly take account of the opportunities of leaving the EU. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on the 23rd of June 2016, the people of this country took a decision to leave the European Union in the context of a wide range of economic information. The purpose of this analysis is not to question that decision, which this House voted overwhelmingly to uphold. I hope all members of this House will agree that we should continue to respect the result of the referendum.
Sir Keir Starmer.
Not good enough. Here we go again, Mr. Speaker. Brexit impact assessments, take two. For the past year, we've called on the government to publish Brexit impact assessment. A simple argument. On decisions of this significance, Parliament is entitled to know the likely impact of the government's approach to Brexit and thus to hold the government to account. The government has refused repeatedly our requests. Last year, the Secretary of State initially insisted that these reports existed in excruciating detail, but they were so sensitive that nobody else could see them. After this House passed a binding humble address, the Secretary of State changed tack, telling the Brexit Select Committee just last month that no economic forecast of outcome had ever existed. Last night we learned that an analysis has been produced after all. This is now piling absurdity upon absurdity. And there's some pretty obvious questions, Mr. Speaker. When was this new analysis commissioned? In particular, was it before or after the Secretary of State gave evidence to the Brexit Select Committee last month on this issue? Is this the only report that's been prepared on the Brexit scenarios? If not, what other analysis has been done? Does this new analysis model the government's Brexit approach? If not, why not? If so, will it lead to changes in government policy? Finally, and most importantly, will the Secretary of State now publish this now? Not in 9 months, but now, so that we can hold the government properly to account. Mr. Speaker, we've been here before. It took a great deal of time last year and the use of a humble address to force the government to release documents relating to Brexit. The Secretary of State has a chance today to avoid a repeat of that exercise if he commits to publishing this new analysis in full. Will he do so?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman raises impact assessments, and what I can say to the House is we've always been absolutely clear that we have a wide range of programme of analysis which is evolving continually. But this economic analysis is not what is formally known as an impact assessment. But what I would say to the House, Mr. Speaker, is that the right on...
Order! Excessive gesticulation by a number of members, which is unseemly and certainly unstatesmanlike. Let's hear from the fella. Steve Baker.
What the Right Honourable Gentleman does and what the party opposite does is completely neglect our duty to safeguard the national interest in the course of these negotiations. I can understand, Mr. Speaker, why the Right Honourable Gentleman and those behind him would want the reports in the press to be accurate. Fundamentally, they don't wish to leave the European Union. For them, Mr. Speaker, and for him, good news is a disaster and bad news is a welcome confirmation of their worldview. They await each set of employment figures with eager anticipation, only to have their hopes dashed when every set shows an ever-increasing number of people in work. They gleefully celebrate warnings from banks about the possibility of jobs moving to the continent. Then they have to retreat when a few months later they assert the supremacy of the City of London. I don't blame them, Mr. Speaker. They care passionately about remaining in the European Union and they want to overturn the result. But their strategy is becoming clear, Mr. Speaker. Demoralisation, delay and revocation. Mr. Speaker, that is not what our parties stood for at the last election. Our parties were clear. Our parties were clear that we would respect the result of the referendum, and that requires the government to deliver the best possible Brexit. And that is what we are trying to do. As I said in the opening words of my reply, when the time comes for a meaningful vote, the government will ensure that the House is appropriately informed. But what I will say to the House is that we can see what some of these economic forecasts, what some of this analysis can be worth. Take, for example, the respective Bank of England. What institution could be more respected for its analysis? But in August 2016, they made a quantitative forecast of the impact of Brexit. What did they say? They said that exports would go down by 0.5%, but they went up by 8.3%. They said business investment would go down by 2%. It went up by 1.7%. They said housing investment would go down by 4.75%. It went up by 5%. It said employment growth would be zero, flat. It went up to a new all-time high. Mr. Speaker, the public deserves to see the national interest protected in these negotiations. The public deserves to have a House of Commons of representatives who exhibit a healthy scepticism about economic forecasting.